Lesson 24, Solving Decimal Equations. So we've already looked at solving with fractions and whole numbers. Now what about with decimals? There are a couple ways of doing this. You can multiply all decimals by a power of 10 to remove all the decimals, like you have here. Or you can just use the inverse operations, and then you will have to multiply by a power of 10 at the end, like right here, because you can't divide by a fraction or by a decimal. So it's either you multiply by the power of 10 at the beginning or you do it at the end. So let's take a look at an example. Here we're going to multiply by a power of 10. So if I look at all my numbers here, I have 0.006a plus 0.02 equals 0.2. I need to multiply so I get rid of all decimals. So I have to look at all of them, and I look at the one that has the most decimal places. That's the power of 10 I need to multiply by. Since 0.006 has the most decimal places, that's 3 decimal places, so I have to multiply it by 1,000. So when I multiply everything by 1,000, I end up with 6a. 1,000 times 0.02, so it moves it 3 places. That'll give me 20 equals, multiply 1,000 times 0.2, 1, 2, 3 equals 200. Now this is a lot easier problem to solve. I need to get 6a by itself, so I subtract 20 on both sides. And I get 6a equals 180. Now I can divide by 6 to get a by itself. Do that on both sides. 180 divided by 6 would give me an answer of 30. Next one, multiply these by a power of 10. So these all have 2 decimal places, so I'm just going to multiply this by 100. 100 times 0.25 is 25. 100 times 0.18y equals 18y. And 100 times 0.97 equals 97. To get 18y by itself, just going to subtract 25 on both sides. I get 18y equals 72. And the last step, to get y by itself, I divide by 18. 72 divided by 18 gives us an answer of 4. Next side here, multiply everything by 100 because the most decimal places is 2. So 100 times 0.05 is 5. 100 times 0.5 is 50. 100 times 0.15 is 15q. Now to solve, get the 15q by itself, so I subtract 50 on both sides. That gives me a negative 45 equals a negative 15q. To get q by itself, divide by a negative 15. 45, negative 45 divided by a negative 15 gives us an answer of 3. So q has to equal positive 3. Next example, here just want to use the inverse operations first, and then we will multiply by a power of 10. So here we're going to add 1.2 to both sides. So when we do that, we have a negative 0.03n equals, we take our negative 1.44 plus a 1.2 gives us an answer of a negative 0.24. Now, since I'll have to divide by, we're going to have to divide by a negative 0.03. Before I do my division, I'm going to get rid of my decimals. So I'm going to multiply this by 100 to remove all decimals. So 100 times a negative 0.03n is just negative 3n. 100 times a negative 0.24 is just 24. And now that makes it a lot easier problem. Divide by negative 3 on both sides. N would equal a positive 8. So you can see either way you're going to have to multiply by a power of 10. If you just put in your calculator as a negative 0.24 divided by a negative 0.03, you'll still get the same answer, but you need to know when you're showing your work that that's what you're really doing. The calculator is doing the work for you, but that's what the calculator is calculating inside. Let's do another one here. This time, let's do the same thing, just use the inverse operations first. So I'm going to subtract 1.4. So I have a negative 0.5n equals 7.5. I want to get rid of my decimals, so I'm going to multiply everything by 10 because that's going to get rid of my decimals. So 10 times a negative 0.5 is a negative 5n. 10 times 7.5 is 75. To get n by itself, I divide by negative 5. 75 divided by negative 5 would give us a negative 15. So n equals a negative 15. Next example, so decimal parts of numbers. So an easy way of doing these would be of writing these as an equation. So 0.48 of in math means multiplication times 86 is what number? So is in math is equals, and I just put a variable for what number. So I take 0.48 times 86, and would equal 41.28. 0.6 of times 24 is what number? So 0.6 times 24 equals, so n would equal 14.4. And let's look at an example of an application with the word problem. The height of an average mandrill is 2.54 centimeters, more than 12 times the length of its tail. If the height of a mandrill is 78.74 centimeters, then what is its length of its tail? So the height of an average mandrill is 2.54 centimeters more than 12 times the length of its tail. So the height is 2.54 more than 12 times the length. So plus 2.54. And they said the height of the mandrill is 78.74. So I'm going to substitute that in for my height. So 78.74 equals 12 times the length plus 2.54. So now I need to get the 12L by itself. So I subtract 2.54 to both sides. I end up with 76.20 equals 12L. To get L by itself, I divide by 12. So 76.20 divided by 12 gives us an answer. The length of its tail would be 6.35 centimeters. And example, the last example, another application. The distance from town A to town C is 52.8 kilometers. So from here over here is 52.8 kilometers. What is the distance from town B to town C? So you want to find this part. Well, I know that x plus 2x has to equal 52.8 because this piece plus the green piece equals this large piece here. Now if we solve this, 1x plus 2x is 3x. 3x equals 52.8. To get x by itself, I divide by 3. I'm left with x equaling, so 52.8 divided by 3 gives us an answer of 17.6. But that's not the answer to the piece that we want. 17.6 is this part. Now to find here, I just take 2 times the 17.6. So 2 times 17.6 would give us a distance of 35.2 kilometers. And that would be our answer.